Canada has been a center of immigration for a very long time. In the past and present, many people have come to Canada in search of a new beginning. There was a campaign set up in the early years of the 1900s before World War I to encourage people from all over the world to come to Canada to work. Due to this campaign, many immigrants came to Canada to work on the Canadian Pacific Railway, which was a huge aspect of early Canada and aided it in building a prosperous country. Now there is a hidden story behind the CPR and immigrants, one that many people may not know. Those immigrants working on the CPR faced more than just poor working conditions. They faced discrimination, huge taxes, and many other setbacks. The head tax was a huge part of immigration for Chinese immigrants. It was a tax that only Chinese people who wanted to move to Canada had to pay. It was established in 1885 and it lasted until 1923. Another condition of the head tax was that the Canadian Chinese immigrants couldn't leave Canada for more than 2 years without paying another $500 re-entry tax. Over 81,000 people ended up paying this tax, and the government received around $33 million, which is equivalent to $326 million today. Due to the head tax, mostly men immigrated to Canada and sent whatever money they could back to their families in China. This led to a very bachelor community. Underground gambling was a very common activity, as well as opium smuggling, and many gangs were formed. This was due to the poverty-stricken conditions. Although Canada did provide the Chinese immigrants with a safe haven from the racist world run by the European Canadians, and it provided a cultural hub for the Chinese immigrants. Work conditions for the Chinese immigrants were very poor and usually unsafe. As well, they were underpaid, making around 1/2 or 1/3 of their white colleagues' salaries. One woman named Chow was an immigrant who came over right after World War II, but her story goes much further back than that. Her husband moved to Canada in 1913 and had to pay the head tax. He came back to China in 1930 to marry her, but went back to Canada after that. They were separated for many years with only small visits due to the Exclusion Act and the re-entry head tax. Chow was later able to move to Canada in 1950. She moved her children into Sudbury, Ontario with her husband, where they ran many restaurants. Chow's husband later passed away in 1967, leaving her a single mother to her children. One of her sons, Yu, remembered her bringing out a document and waving it around, saying she would right this injustice. That document was her husband's head tax certificate. In her late 80s, she contacted the Chinese Canadian National Council, who were heading the redress campaign to bring justice to the head tax. Of course, Chow volunteered immediately to be one of the 3 claimants on the class action lawsuit against the government. She traveled around Ontario in her wheelchair to spread awareness on the racist past Canada has against Chinese Canadian immigrants. The lawsuit was eventually dismissed, but it led to discussions with the federal government, which ended when the Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, made a formal apology in Cantonese to the families and people who had to pay the head tax. The government also offered $20,000 compensation to the surviving head taxpayers or their widows.
Therefore, Mr. Speaker, once again, on behalf of the people and government of Canada, we offer a full apology to Chinese Canadians for the head tax and express our deepest sorrow for the subsequent exclusion of Chinese immigrants. Gana Dai Dohi.
There were mixed opinions about the apology and compensation. Many were very happy and even praised the Prime Minister on his apology. Others, mostly the younger Chinese community, thought that the apology wasn't enough to right the wrongs of the past. Many thought that the head tax was too little too late, as there were very few head taxpayers left. Other people were angry that the compensation wasn't given to the head taxpayers' children. Chinese Canadian immigrants are a huge part of Canadian society today, with the head tax apology being over 10 years ago. There are still efforts to bring the racist and dark past of the Chinese Canadian immigrants to light. There are many community programs and initiatives to help people who are struggling and to help bring the community together. Also, in education, the government is making sure that Canada's youth learned about what happened so that it doesn't happen again. This process is happening all thanks to people like Chow, Quen.
Moreover, we acknowledge the overwhelming contribution by Chinese Canadians to British Columbia's culture, history, and economy. On behalf of the province of British Columbia, and on behalf of this entire Legislative Assembly, we sincerely apologize for the province's historical wrongs. We are sorry for the discriminatory legislation and racist policies enacted by past provincial governments. We will ensure that this never happens again.